So one of my goals when starting this channel was to never miss a video any week. So I've made every single week since I started the channel, and this week's not going to be any different. As I'm sure you can tell from the sound of my voice, I'm feeling extremely under the weather, but I have to still make a video. So I'll do it come hell or high water. And so here I am. I don't have COVID. I tested negative, but I do have some sort of like super cold that's going around. So um, apologies if I sound like hot garbage, but today we're going to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 1984 film that followed in the wake of Halloween and Friday the 13th, and then kind of established itself as its own particular slasher film that does some things differently than those movies, and kind of sets itself apart. So we're going to talk about it today. Let's go. Thanks so much for checking out the video. Before we get started, click on that red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new video. So, 1984, A Nightmare on Elm Street. It comes out, 6 years after Halloween, a movie that really, really like rock solid establishes the slasher genre. And then 4 years after, 1980s Friday the 13th. So, something both of those movies do really well is like establish a very unique protagonist. You have Michael Myers, who is like front and center throughout the film. And then you have like the faceless killer in Friday the 13th, which turns out to be Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mom, at the end of that movie. And what I like about Nightmare on Elm Street is that it does something very different than both of those movies. And that is that it tackles this idea of a serial killer that ultimately like can impact people in their dreams. And if he kills you in your dreams, he kills you in the real world. It's kind of a cool, like, unique twist on the slasher genre that had never been done before. So I think when Wes Craven made the film, it feels very much like it's on a shoestring budget, made on the cheap, very much feels like an independent film. And I think that's a strength ultimately that works in the movie's favor. Um, the It's a scary film. It really does dive headlong into the dream concept throughout the movie. And one of the good and bad things about that is that Freddy Krueger isn't really in the movie all that much. Robert Englund, really, this is the movie that established him as a horror actor. And he is like maybe in this movie between 5 to 10 minutes. And you could say that's a negative, especially looking back at how well established this character has become. But it also works in the movie's favor because the idea of Freddy, the concept of him, the idea that he's stalking you in your dreams, really, really, really helps the movie establish this tone and tenor and tension that permeates the entire thing. And you got to give Craven some credit for that. This is the movie that established him. He had done, The Hills. I think The Hills Have Eyes was before this. I don't remember. But I know that he had done Last House on the Left, and this is the movie that really put him on the map. Do I think it's Craven's best work? No, I would probably say that Scream is the movie that really I think he'll be most remembered for, which is kind of funny because it pokes fun at a concept that started in Friday the 13th, which is like the sexually promiscuous characters getting offed in horrible and disgusting ways, and something that he then picks up from Friday the 13th and a little bit from Halloween, and then really, really like drives home in this movie too. Englund's portrayal of what is in this movie is really good. It also, there's no like backstory to the character, which I think is kind of interesting. It's only established in dialogue, and it's simply like explained by the mother of the main character, and it's sort of like a twist that happens kind of near the back half of the film. And the probably the big issue I have is that the character of Freddy himself, and this isn't just a problem in this movie, it's just a problem for me in all of the movies, is that I don't give a rip about this character. I don't care about Freddy whatsoever. He's not, there's no empathy. And granted, like, I'm not super empathetic towards Michael Myers or Chucky, but of all those main characters, I would say Chucky, Jason, Michael Myers, Leatherface, and Freddy Krueger. I think he's probably the weakest of all of them, at least for me, because I just don't care at all about him. And he's I don't know. I don't know what it is that doesn't really appeal to me about him. But this movie just doesn't. There's nothing about this character that I give a rip about. You know, I care about Michael Myers despite him being this faceless character. I care about Jason because he's established as sort of a sympathetic character based on what happened to him and his death because of negligent, camp counselors. It's not much, but something is established. And one of the differences between this film and the 2010 reboot that Jackie Earl Haley was in as he portrayed I'm sorry, as he portrayed Freddy Krueger. One of the main differences between this film and that film, and I think that's something that film does better, even though it's clearly an inferior movie, is that it at least establishes something with Freddy. It shows us his backstory. It shows him getting hunted down by these vengeful parents. And it also does something that's really, really interesting that this film doesn't do at all. And that's establish doubt in the mind of the audience as to whether Freddy is guilty of the crimes he's been accused of. And in this movie, there's just no doubt. Like, he's just a piece of trash and a terrible person and a murderer who killed like 20 kids. In the reboot, that is very much like up for debate and a matter of contention between the filmmakers and the audience until it's established in the back half of the movie as to whether or not he is truly guilty of those crimes. So now this review isn't a comparison of the two, but I think it's worth pointing out that that's something that is, I think, better about the reboot and really is sort of missing here when you look back and have the benefit of hindsight. Freddy is just kind of like in this movie and just thrown out there, and he just kind of exists in this world and hunts people down in their dreams, and that part of it works really well for what it is. So the movie deserves credit for doing something very unique and different. And all of these films at the time, they had to do, like, what was the hook that made it different? Michael Myers, faceless killer, point of view in the beginning, kills his sister and becomes just this pure evil, right? Jason isn't even in the first movie. It's this mother who's stricken by grief, driven to murder these camp counselors who she feels have wronged her by essentially taking the life of her son. Chucky is like the crazy serial killer who's into like the weird voodoo stuff and then ends up like putting his soul into a doll. And that's kind of weird and crazy. And then you've got, Leatherface, and he's the redneck with like the mental deficiency issues who completely just like is at the whim of his insane cannibal family and kind of does whatever crazy stuff they ask of him. So I think that Freddy and the way he's established in this, I think it's fine for what it is. There's just not a lot of depth there, but at least there's that hook that sets him apart from everybody else. So if you haven't seen On Nightmare on Elm Street, it's kind of a classic. It's the movie that really gave Johnny Depp his start in Hollywood. It's his first film. The performances here, for what they are all really good. The music has like this kind of like it's like a synth kind of very, very like early to mid 80s synth pop that works really, really well and is kind of like an underrated theme score. And yes, if you haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street, it feels very independent. It's got some pretty terrifying imagery that really is haunting, and it has established itself as, a horror classic. It's got some famous shots: Johnny Depp being sucked into the bed, the girl in the beginning of the movie, Tina, getting slammed up against the ceiling and just like torn apart by Freddy. It's got Freddy and the fedora and the razor glove and that hideous red and green sweater that the characters reference throughout the film. So yeah, check it out. I would say check out the sequel too. I really would. It's interesting to see the differences between the two. 2010 reboot is very much a product of its time, and this movie is a product of its time as well. So check it out. If you like horror movies, it's classic. Even though it's definitely showing its age at this point, check it out. Thanks so much for checking out the review. If you enjoyed it, found it helpful, please consider subscribing. You can also like and share it. That tells YouTube it's worth promoting. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think of A Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.